This is Jeff Fedotin with Believe in Chiefs on the Believe Network, Kansas City's #1 sports podcast network. The only place with a show for every team in KC and more. We believe in our teams. Do you believe? On this week's show, former Kansas City Chiefs offensive lineman Joe Valerio and I discuss the Chiefs' 15th consecutive victory over the Broncos, preview the season-ending game against the Raiders, and discuss what it's like dealing with such a devastating NFL injury like Bill safety Damar Hamlin sadly suffered. But before we get into those serious weighty topics, Joe, let's start with the Chiefs a little bit. The Chiefs are sleepwalking a little bit through the last month. You know, they're sneaking by lousy teams, including last weekend's 27-24 win against the Broncos. Now comes the Raiders team that just sent their franchise quarterback home. You know, almost has like preseason vibes a little bit. Joe, are you concerned, or will the Chiefs be able to kind of flip the switch come playoff time? Kind of like how those great Phil Jackson Lakers teams used to do.
Yeah, Jeff, I love your analogy, sleepwalking. God, I don't think I could have summed that up any better because that's what it seems like. It just seems like they're doing enough to get it done, and no more, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's their skin of their teeth was a term that came. I was texting with a friend over the weekend,
Mhm.
and we were kind of going back and forth about the whole Broncos country, let's ride. And of course, he was like Chiefs country, and I'm like, let's ride, and I said, by the skin of our teeth. And that term came up, and that's what it just seems like. I can't, it's really hard to pinpoint what it
Mhm.
is. I mean, it's Patrick Mahomes is having a career type year. Their defense at times looks amazing. Um, they're getting things going a little bit in the running game. It's
Remember when we were so concerned about that? That seems like it's not even a concern anymore, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it could have rushed a little, could have done a little bit more. I mean,
Yeah,
I
that wasn't
saw
their best game
it
against them,
wasn't their best
but
game,
overall, right.
but overall, I think, they're still, beating teams in yards per play, and they just seem to be playing down to competition,
Mhm.
which is not hard to do in the NFL. It's easy to
Mhm.
fall into that trap, when you're week in and week out. It's a long season, and I just hope that sometimes in those situations, Jeff, it's like like a race car. You can't just drive a race car slow and then think that it's going to hit 200 plus miles an hour at some point. You have to run that car fast to keep it
Mhm.
going fast. And I'm maybe using that analogy, overstretching it a little bit, but that's how I'm kind of thinking of this. I just hope that there's no gunk in the carburetor. Cars don't even have carburetors anymore, but I just hope there's no gunk in the carburetor when the playoffs start, and that they have all these kinks worked out and they put that complete game together. Because still haven't seen it, right? If
Mhm.
it's not one thing, it's another. If it's defense secondary giving up too many big plays, and they shore things up. We don't get it going in the running game, and then if we
Mhm.
don't get it going in the running game, we struggle in special teams. Like we can't get the
Right,
perfect, and
right.
nobody plays a perfect game, but we can't get the complete game together.
Mhm.
And I think that's what probably has a lot of fans puzzled, has me puzzled, and probably has the coaching staff puzzled because they don't not want to be playing complete games. There's some element is missing in the formula for sure.
You know, Bill Parcells credited those really competitive NFC East. Well, when he was the Giants head coach, credited those really competitive NFC East games when back then the Redskins were great, the Giants were great, the Eagles, and then the Cowboys would have the triplets dynasty is kind of preparing them for the playoffs. Originally, we thought before the season the AFC West was going to be so tough that all the teams were going to be kind of beaten down. I
Hmm.
wonder if there's like a happy medium between what the Chiefs are going
Yeah.
through now and then you want to be challenged, but you don't want to be just, have be so challenged that you're really kind of worn down by the playoff season. I don't know, Joe. Did iron
Yeah.
sharpen iron, or what do you think here?
I don't. That's a really good question. It's a great point because not to change. I'm staying on the subject, obviously, but not to turn it to the NFC East because you mentioned them.
Mhm.
They are. That's happening to them right now. What's
Mhm.
happening to the NFC East is exactly what I was afraid was going to happen to the AFC West.
Mhm.
It's almost like mirror image. Isn't that funny? And
Uh,
here I am, I live in Philadelphia and I follow the Eagles, obviously my boyhood team. But like I'm watching that same thing happen. The Eagles can't clinch this home field, right? They're and this does relate to the Chiefs and the AFC West. I don't want people to think I'm going the whole NFC East centric here. But Jalen Hurts is hurt. The Eagles can't seem to get it together to clinch this home field. The Washington Commanders have fallen off of the, kind of off the wagon there, and are falling out of playoff contention. Where at one point the entire NFC East was going to the playoffs,
mhm.
and it looked like that could be a big possibility. That was a good possibility. Um, the Cowboys they're the Cowboys. They're going to find something's going to happen to them, and the Giants will limp in. Like this is exactly I'm watching what I was afraid of was going to happen in the AFC West. Now, the AFC West, I think, is going through another, like you said, can we get a happy medium where, like, yeah, like what are the Raiders going to do to get the Chiefs ready for the playoffs? Now, a lot of it obviously depends on what happens with the home field or not, right? So if somehow the Chiefs get that number one seed, we're going to see a completely different Raiders week than we're used to seeing.
Mhm.
This isn't going to be the Raiders week of 1991 where we had to win two games back to back against the Raiders, right? That's just not going to happen. Um, and even so, it's not really, if unless the Chiefs don't have home field. I mean, is it a must win? I mean, yeah, every game's a must win, but it's just definitely not going to be a Raiders week that we're used to,
Mhm.
for sure. So yeah, God, Jeff, you're bringing up, you're stumping me today because these questions are great and they're questions that we've all been asking ourselves. What's better? Is it better to, like you said, iron sharpening iron, and you're just like you're just on high alert for the entire season, and you're working, or do you need a air quote bye week every once in a while to let your players rest and have an easy game where you can try out new plays, new
Mhm.
formations, try new players at different positions, do different things to make you ready for the playoffs. I think, Jeff, I think if I had to, now that I'm talking through it, I would say that I think you want a happy medium.
Mhm.
I think you want, no team has ever gone undefeated, right? Since the 1972 Dolphins. So we haven't ever seen that. So nobody's going to play that perfect season. And that's going to, especially now with 17 games, that's going to be really hard to do. And with the parity of the league. Um, so, we saw what happened with the Patriots when they did go, undefeated almost, and they struggled. So, you know, I'm going with happy medium.
Mhm.
If I had to, that was the longest answer to get to the shortest question, or the longest answer to get to a short question. I'm going happy medium. I think there needs to be, if you come in where you've had some tough games, some good road wins, games where you had to pull it out, but you were always beating the teams handily that you needed to beat. And I think that's maybe the happy medium that this team is not finding right now. They didn't beat the Bills. They didn't beat the Bengals. We'll throw the Colts game out, and they're not really beating teams that handily that they should be beating. They're winning, but they're not beating them.
Right. Well, Joe, the talk of the NFL right now, of course, is the horribly sad, devastating injury to Damar Hamlin on Monday Night Football, the Bills safety. You think of comparisons in NFL history, and one of them was in 1992 when Dennis Byrd, different injury, but so serious, and the way it stopped play. Dennis Byrd of the New York Jets became paralyzed on play. Joe, you were blocking him. You were the right tackle for the Chiefs on the game. Kind of take listeners through your emotions, what it's like to have that kind of devastating injury during the game and how you come back from that.
Yeah, yeah, Jeff. They're November 29th, 1992. It's stuck in my brain, etched in my memory as a day that I'll never forget. I had my hands on Dennis when he collided with Scott Mercereau. We were both John Alt and I were pushing our guys past the pocket, and they collided and caught a piece of Dave Craig. Both of us got short corners, and the emotion that you feel immediately. Well, anytime you see a player go down, opponent or teammate, right? First thing is, man, I hope they're okay, right? Because it's a brotherhood, it's a fraternity, and you don't want to see players get hurt. And the players that work to hurt other players or seemingly do shouldn't be in the league. And so I think you kind of, just to get that out of the way, you always feel for players who get hurt, especially when you know it's going to be serious, right? Because it's their livelihood, and it's you have a very short window to have this career. A lot of work goes into it, years of preparation, and you don't want it to be cut short for something that maybe could have been prevented, or for a freak injury. And so there's always those injuries, and you kind of just know that that's part of the game. You know, players that players who haven't had at least some kind of what I would call a more than minor injury, they're probably not playing a lot if they haven't had one, because something's gonna happen on the field. It's just the chances are high. Obviously the chances are very slim, as we see by the number of these kind of things that happen on a football field, at least in the NFL. It's you kind of put those out of your mind, right? Because you just know there's the risk of these very serious type injuries. In some of these cases, I don't know if this is the right medical term, but like semi life threatening, things like what happened to Dennis Byrd on that fateful day, right? Where he, lost the use of his legs, and was never able to play football again. Mike Utley was another player for the Lions. Freak thing. He was blocking a defensive lineman. Defensive lineman jumped up in the air to try to bat the ball down, came down on his neck. Didn't look like anything. You're like, okay, just came down on his head. We all have head butted something in our lives. You didn't have to play football to have, fallen and like bumped your head or something, right? You fall off a bike or whatever. And, and then all of a sudden Mike Utley never walks again. He's been in a wheelchair his entire life since that moment. And you're just like, wow, like, okay, that's crazy that those things can happen. But, as a player, you put them out of your mind, because for a lot of players, the rewards are greater than the risk. The benefits of playing in the NFL from just a competitive perspective, and today especially the dollars, and what it can do to players financially, they just kind of, like, people just outweigh it. They love playing the game and they take the risk. This one was so different though, because like when Dennis got hurt, we knew probably within, I would say, time kind of stands still. So it's hard to remember back now, almost 30 years to the actual timing, but it was probably only 30 or 45 seconds before we really knew he was hurt, like really hurt. Like he didn't tear his ACL, right? He didn't, pop a disc in his back, or like, where, he was not like he wasn't moving, and short of moving his arm. So those situations, it just like ratchets up, right? When you see a guy writhing in pain, grabbing his knee or banging the ground, like you kind of know, all right, like he's hurt and you don't want him to be hurt, but you're like, okay, the game has to go on, right? Like you've got to keep playing, and that's just part of the game. But when you see players, and then you go to the next level, you go to the Mike Utley, Dennis Byrd level, where, thank goodness they both didn't, go into some kind of cardiac arrest, or like where they were hurt so bad that their heart stopped. You're kind of like, all right, he's going to get up. Like he's going to get on the stretcher. In both cases, both players, gave the thumbs up when they were carried off in the stretcher. Like, all right, we've seen that before, right? And you just kind of put it out of your mind for that game, and then you kind of live with the ramifications later. And this one though, so that's like level B, right? There's a level C, there's a level B, and then this one was like level A. I mean, he needed to be revived, Jeff. There was a chance, not that there wasn't a chance that Dennis or Mike couldn't have actually passed away on the field, but like there was a really good chance that he could have. And you're just like, wow, like, all right, this game has to end. Like, they can't, no one can even think about playing this game, because those other injuries, players can put a little bit out of their mind. Something like this, witnessing something like this, that's so devastating. you can't play the game of football, which is a violent game. It's an emotional game. It's a high-paced, high-stake game. You can't play it immediately after that. Like you can't. Like you just can't. Like there's no way those players could. Somebody else would have gotten hurt. And that would have been a fear. Is it like? And then you're thinking, well, why are we playing this game? Like how important is it? And so
Joe,
yeah.
do you remember if, when I at first, we think, oh, whenever you see a player down, you're like, oh man, it might be a concussion in this day and age, which is a very serious injury.
Mhm.
This went to a whole another level. But then when they brought the ambulance out, that's kind of when my antenna went up. I was like, geez, I don't remember that. Do you remember if for Dennis Bird they brought the ambulance out on the field, or is it such just like a fog of war thing you don't remember?
I don't think they did. I'd have to, gosh, I'd have to go back and watch the video or try to remember back, but I don't think they did,
Uh-huh.
Jeff. And I don't think they did for Mike Utley either. I think it was they carted him off the field on a stretcher.
Mhm.
So, took all the precautions, cut the helmet off, took the, I'm trying to remember if for both of them, they even took their helmets off. But try to cut through some of the pads and stuff like
Mhm.
that to get get them stable, because you don't want to move somebody too much
Right.
if you think
Yeah.
there's a suspected. Remember, sometimes with these neck injuries, they're suspected neck injuries, right? Because you can't take an X-ray or an MRI right there on the field.
Mhm.
You got to get the player off the field into some medical care. And I think at that point, players are like, all right, well, the optimist in all players, right? Because you have to be an optimist to play this game. You can't be a pessimist.
Right.
You'd go crazy. The optimist, like, all right, he's gonna be fine. He maybe he just jammed his neck and he couldn't feel his leg, had a little tingle, and he's gonna get up and walk. And so you kind of put it out of your mind until later. And we didn't find out that Dennis was, paralyzed, and he was going to be paralyzed probably for hours after the game, right? Maybe even somewhere on the flight home, or maybe even after that, maybe when we landed, because you just back then, especially, the social media and stuff wasn't around. But in a situation like this, man, the emotion that you saw out on that field was real, because our players are thinking about, that could have been me, and that this kind of really could have almost happened to anybody. And I think I so definitely the ambulance ratchets things up to the nth degree, right? Because that is immediate care, right? When defibrillators are coming out and people are doing CPR, that's that's for real. Like I've never, that's you just don't ever see that, right?
Mhm.
There's never, even as serious as the injuries to like a Mike Utley, or
A bird. Yeah.
Daryl Stingley, or
Mhm.
Dennis Bird, like nobody needed to do CPR. And that's what I think really took this to the nth degree.
Well, just know we're prayers with Damar Hamlin. We're thinking about him and his family. Wanted to mention that before we go into our ad read here. Well, Bet Online remains your number one source for all your sports betting this season. Everything from NFL and bowl season to esports. You'll always find the latest odds, team matchup info, players' news, game trends. It's all at Bet Online. Bet Online features live betting, free contests, and live scores for almost any sport or game imaginable. We're the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite leagues and events. Head to Bet Online AG to join and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, to receive your rewards. Bet Online, where the game starts. Well, Joe, now that we've talked about the more important start, the more important part of the devastating Hamlin injury, just the emotional effect and our thoughts and prayers of the players. There are some logistics involved. And the Chiefs today, we're recording it Tuesday. We're posting the pod on Wednesday. They canceled their Tuesday media session. Tuesday's typically a day off throughout the NFL, but since the Chiefs play on Saturday, they were going to do media Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off, and a travel day. Anyhow, which is an unusual move that they canceled that. And so I'm wondering if they're almost kind of waiting to hear from the league on certain matters. Anyhow, they've announced, the NFL has announced they won't play the Bills Bengals game in week 18. My theory is they play in week 19 and maybe get rid of the bye before the Super Bowl week, because I mean this game has very important stakes. I mean, the home field advantage is on the line, and I'm sure the Bills want to play for Hamlin in the sense they wouldn't want that to be docked, home field advantage from missing a game, and you can't just give them a tie or give them a win. That's not fair to the Chiefs. Joe, how do you think this shakes out logistics wise?
Yeah, it's a really touchy, tricky subject, right, to approach because no one wants to minimize anything, that happened from the injury perspective, right? I mean, that is no one wants that to, to be in any way disrespectful to Damar Hamlin or his family or the players in both teams who witnessed it, the fans that were there. Like nobody wants that. But there is that broader question that the league it has to go on, right? I mean, there's too much invested in what has been up to this point and then what will be coming after, right? Because it's there's 32 teams, there's 50 60 players per team, there's front office, there's a lot of people that's also their livelihood as well.
Mhm.
Advertisers, sponsors, right? It's a very, very, very big game. And
Mhm.
it's no different than in business. God forbid someone loses a colleague at work. I mean, you have to get mourn, and then you go through the stages, and then the business goes on, and because people are depending on you for your work, and so it's a really tough it's a tough it's a tough topic to broach because no one wants to be insensitive to it.
Mhm.
But you're right, there are this game was that's another thing too, Jeff. Just one little aside is think about how many people were watching this game that might not have typically been watching a Monday night game, right?
I
Because
was
the Monday night games have been so, oh God,
Yeah,
they've been so
I was
lackluster.
so. Speaking of that, I watch. I'm a big enough football nerd. I watch the lackluster Monday night games, but
Yeah.
I was so excited. Like Joe, I was looking forward to this game all day. Talking about a range of emotions. I went from just it had the beginnings of this is going to be an epic game, and I was so excited to
Yeah.
then getting downright depressed as we feel so bad for the Damar Hamlin and his teammates.
Yeah. So, like, God, I think I just, as an aside, I just think about all the people who were watching that live, and the emotional effect that that's going to have on them, other players that were
Mhm.
watching the game, right? I mean, come on, if it's the Broncos versus the Rams, yeah, like are the Philadelphia Eagles or the Chiefs all getting together at somebody's house to watch the game? Probably not, right? Because it's the Broncos and Rams. But like, I'm sure there was a lot of players, more players than usual watching this game live. I mean, that just throws a whole nother emotional wrench into the gears. But yeah, Jeff, I mean, there's probably a lot of speculation about what the NFL is going to do. They're going to get questioned on both sides, right? If they go act too soon, they're going to be, oh, well, they're insensitive and they're not thinking about the players and not thinking about what's really important in life. And if they wait too long, people are going to say, hey, this, what's the deal, right? You've got to make a decision here about how this affects all the other teams and how it's going to affect a season that has been invested in by a lot of people, players, and businesses. So it's a really, really tricky situation to maneuver through. And I don't envy anybody who's in these situations trying to cover it in the media, trying to deal with it as the NFL, trying to do it as the teams, right? Because, like you said, I mean, the Bills and the Bengals, having seen that, aren't going to want Damar's memory. Listen, he's still alive. I know that, but like they don't want that part of his legacy to be remembered that, he ended the NFL season, right? Like this was a dream of his to play in the NFL. I saw some great videos of him approaching his family before games and what he's done in the community. And I don't think, I don't think anybody would want to, for his legacy to not be something, he was doing something that he really loved, right? He was playing football, and that's where this happened. So it's a really, really, really tough situation. But I think they have to come to some conclusion about what they're going to do. And I think the NFL just needs to let some time sit, and I'm sure they probably have a plan, but I think waiting to see how things turn out for Damar and his family, I think is probably a good move. And then I'm sure the NFL players, knowing what I've seen on social media, knowing the mentality of a lot of players and the brotherhood feeling that you get in this fraternity, they're going to deal with whatever is most respectful to Damar Hamlin. And if it means eliminating the week before the Super Bowl and the two Super Bowl teams don't get a bye, the
My
NFL players are going to go, we did the right thing for
yeah,
Damar Hamlin and his family. Um, if they just go, hey, Bills and Bengals, let's see, it's Tuesday, fly out on Friday, we'll push the next game back to Tuesday. It's like, oh, people will be like, come on. They're going to be like, wait a minute, that's too soon. And so, I know that the players will be a-okay. And that to me is the most important. Those are the people in the locker room and in the front offices, I think, are the most important in this situation. And fans are just going to have to deal with it. And businesses, sponsors, all those other people, they're just going to have to deal with whatever is the most respectful to Damar Hamlin, given the gravity of the situation. So yeah, I think that's an absolute possibility, Jeff. Just push everything back a week and forget the bye week for the Super Bowl. And I know in my heart that players and front office people and the people that are involved in the game itself are going to be a-okay with that, because it's probably the most respectful thing to do.
and I think playoff seeding is going to matter because I don't see any way the Chiefs lose to the Raiders. Otherwise, if they had lost, you're like, all right, well, maybe we can throw this game
Yeah.
out. But I think home field is going to be on the line. And Joe, when you think of the Chiefs Raiders rivalry, you think of the most noteworthy player who played for the both teams, Marcus Allen. Well, he's golfing in the 2023 Hilton Grand Vacations Tournament of Champions from January 19th to 22nd. So I spoke to him about that event. He said people always ask him to pick a team, Chiefs or Raiders, but he roots for both of them. He really roots for just more than the team colors, relationships, players he played with. Moving on. Sorry, I wasted a lot of time there, but
No
all
worries, bud.
good. Worked out. Well, Joe, for this Raiders game, I kind of feel the script. I think the Raiders are going to jump out early. That's what they've done. But I think the Chiefs come back and win. That's kind of the playbook of the Raiders season. Including what they did last week against a really good 49ers team, but then the 49ers won in the end, and including the previous meeting with the Chiefs when they jumped out 17-0. But of course, the Chiefs came back. You think that's going to happen too again this game against the Raiders?
Uh, I got to be honest. I don't want to sound overly optimistic. I don't even know if the Raiders have anything in the tank to even jump out early on this team. They're just a team in complete disarray. I just see the Chiefs just putting one on them. Just because they know that it's a must-win game, especially given that they're probably not. Well, obviously, if they play the Bengals Bills game after this game, they know that they've got to go out and play their best. I think they're going to want to jump on them quick, and I think the Chiefs are going to do that. I just can't see. I just can't see this team pulling it together right now to put together an effort that could really stop the Chiefs. Crazier things happen in the NFL and in week. Well, now I guess we have to say week 18, right, with the bye week and everything. But like in week 18, I just can't see, I just can't see the Raiders pulling this one out, or even jumping out early. I know that's usually the MO in this game, and the Chiefs always put the pedal to the metal, but I just can't see that happening this year. I think the Chiefs are going to want to have a game plan going into this game that, like you said, is going to help them propel into the playoffs as opposed to limping in. And that's my hope. And hope shouldn't be a strategy, but it's what I think is going to happen this week. And I think the Chiefs win this game handily, 31-10, and they walk out of there, with a really, really great regular season under their belt from a wins and losses perspective. Not probably all the games that the fans wanted to see them win the way they won them, but it's pretty tough to go through this league and have a three loss season for sure.
Any concerns about It's funny. I had seen Jarrett Stidham, their new quarterback, after they've benched Carr. I had seen him with the Patriots, and he, did not look good. He basically didn't look like he should be in the NFL. He looked that bad when he was kind of jockeying with Brian Hoyer for for a backup role. But he played very well against a really tough 49ers defense.
Mhm.
Threw for 365 yards. They put up 34 points. Any concerns there?
Well, I think this is going to be, going back to not to make this about the Eagles, but like going back to the Gardner Minshew game against the Cowboys, like first game out of the gate, it's kind of making me think
Beginner's luck
about,
a little bit.
yeah, good term, Jeff. Like, thinking about I almost said Johnny Manziel. Where did that come from? But thinking about, the Rams and what happened there with Baker Mayfield. You know, that first game out, you got nothing to lose, and then all of a sudden, like reality sets in. I watched it happen last week with the Eagles, right? Gardner had that unbelievable game against the Cowboys, right? Putting up all those points. And then this week against the Saints, he just, I'm not saying he laid an egg, but it just wasn't the game he probably thought he was going to have coming out of out of that Cowboys loss, which was an amazing game for both him and the Eagles, I think, given their time without Jalen Hurts. That's why I'm just kind of like, if history repeats itself, that's what I think we're going to see is a little bit of a sophomore slump, where a player just kind of like was riding high on the emotion, and then all of a sudden the reality sets in that, oh man, now everybody's got a little film on me. And the 49ers they had no film on him,
Right,
right?
that's true.
What are his tendencies? Where does he look?
Uh,
The D-backs don't know where his eyes are going. Now all of a sudden there's film. They can see, the Chiefs now are going to be able to see the formations that he likes. And I think they're going to be able to put together a game plan to kind of shut him down, especially if they get pressure, right? If Chris Jones keeps rushing the way he's rushing, it could be a long day. It could be a long day for him. So, I don't want to be overly optimistic about this one, but I think all things are kind of pointing to a pretty sizable Chiefs win.
Bet Online has the spread at 7.5, and I'm kind of liking that. And again, I do think I'm just the Raiders have been up early on so many games, and they just collapse in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
I think the same thing is going to happen, and I think when they get into the fourth quarter, it's going to be in the back of their minds. And I think the Chiefs do win. They sweep the AFC West this year very impressively. Well, if you enjoy this show presented by Bet Online, please subscribe. We're available on your favorite directories: iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, Luminary, and TuneIn. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.